So this will be hopefully helpful for you. So let's go over it. The F word. People often recoil at the notion of forgiveness. It is not hard to see why. The early phase of counseling often precedes with an in-depth exploration of the ways our family dynamic has worked against us. And that's what we've been trying to do for the last couple of weeks by doing the genogram and a triangle, try to see exactly where's the hurt, what were the problems. Once people have a clearer picture of the harm that others have caused them, it is easy to see why forgiving those people might not be the first thing that comes to their mind. What do you mean forgiveness? After all the pain and confusion she caused me, you expect me to forgive her or him just like that? Alone? Okay. So again, it says here, you need to forgive other person. Why? So that you could actually benefit. So it's not necessarily just to release the other person, but it's really for yourself. By the way, this kind of thought is very, very like, like a lot of modern day like books about forgiveness, even if it's not necessarily religious. That's how psychologists usually take the route of forgiveness. Continue on, Esther. Mm-hmm. Okay. So again, it's just re-emphasizing this idea that forgiveness really it's really about self-healing. So it's something that you have to do. Because if you, kind of like what Daniel was talking about, if you don't forgive somebody, then that bitterness or that hatred is going to control you. And all of us have spent some sleepless nights or have gone through a lot of negative feelings because of the pain that we have experienced because we didn't forgive. Okay. So again, the idea is like it's going to benefit you. Okay. But obviously, that is, which is very very true. That's not necessarily Christian in nature. Okay, that's just very like psychology. Like, hey, help yourself by forgiving other person. Okay. Continuing on, we're going to get to the more Christian answer though. Stephen. Okay. So we're going to get into this concept a little bit more. How is forgiveness for God's sake? This is just kind of like an introduction, but we'll get into it a little bit more. Okay, but before we even go into this, let's define what forgiveness actually looks like. Ashley? Okay, so good thing we have Stephen, our accountant, here to help us navigate the world of banking and money. All right, so let's get into it, Danielle. Okay, so you guys kind of get the scenario, right? Let's say I want to buy a home or I want to buy a car. So I go to the bank and I get a loan. So now what happens? I owe the bank money. But again, COVID happened, I lost my job or something like that, and I can't repay it back. Okay, so now I owe the bank money, and the bank has two choices, right? One, obviously, every single bank is going to say, okay, pay up. Okay. Or he could decide to release you from your obligation, which is not realistic whatsoever in a real bank. Unless you, I guess, you could just get you could get bankruptcy, declare bankruptcy. Anyways, he might say, you don't owe me anything. In bank terminology, this is called forgiving the loan. Okay. Or I guess something else is like, I think all of us probably have student loans. Most likely, maybe still, yeah. So again, that's another perfect illustration, right? Like a lot of people want. I think was it Bernie Sanders? One of the politicians was like, yeah, we're gonna, like if I become the president, I'm gonna forgive all the loan. But anyways, it is exactly what we are called to do in our dealings with those whom harm us. Of course, when a bank does that, there are consequences in terms of banking. Okay, it will be a long time before we can get another loan, but the original loan is canceled or forgiven. Okay, so you guys that's very simple, right? If you put it that way. Okay, you owe the bank money or you owe somebody money, then they could say, no, you need to owe me. Okay, you still owe me. Or that other person could say, okay, you don't have to pay me back. Okay, so again, that's the idea of forgiveness. Let's go into a little bit more. Loan. The last one, Colossians. Okay, so again, this verse makes a lot more sense after the whole banking illustration, right? So again, you were dead because of your sin. So the idea is, right, because of your sin, you are in debt. But what does it say? God made you alive with Christ. He forgave you of all your sin. He canceled the sin, or he canceled the loan, right? And then it says, he canceled the wrong of the charge against us and took it away by nailing it to the cross. Does that make sense? So, I mean, the perfect illustration is like, let's say I owe somebody money, but instead, somebody else comes and pays the loan for me. Right? And that's the good news of Jesus. Is that I don't owe money because someone else came and paid it for me instead. All right. So specifically, what does this look like as far as forgiveness goes? Esther. Yeah. Okay. So next week, most likely, I haven't decided yet, but most likely next week, we're going to talk about, there's this phrase called forgive and forget. Okay, and we're going to talk about how that phrase is actually, number one, very, very unhealthy, and number two, very unbiblical. Okay? Because, again, right here, okay, again, just like the banking thing, right? You could forgive the debt. Like, you don't owe me anything, but that doesn't mean that I forget the things that you have done to me. So again, the bank is not going to, they could say, okay, I release you of your debt, But if I go to that bank again and say, can I borrow some money? The bank is going to say, no, no, no. Does that make sense? So forgiveness is not necessarily, okay, of course it does involve feelings as well, but it's not always dictated by feelings alone. Okay? Because some people say, well, I feel like I've forgiven that person, but I continue to have negative feelings. Okay? That could happen. Okay? But what you're saying is, I'm not going to take revenge on you, or I'm not going to expect things from you. You're releasing them of the debt. But that still doesn't mean that you're not going to have negative feelings. There's going to be negative feelings, and those are the things that you have to process and deal with. But there's always going to be some level of that feeling. There's always going to be some level of like remembering that. Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Because God does, for God, it does say like He doesn't remember our sins anymore. Yeah. So we will talk about that next week. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's continue on. Stephen. Okay. So again, three things. Number one, obviously, if you forgive somebody, the other person is going to benefit. Second is God, because again, the whole idea is God wants a healthy relationship with everybody. Because every single person is His sons and daughters, right? And so imagine if you have like two kids and they're fighting with each other, it's going to hurt you as a parent. Okay, and then finally, as we talked about before, the whole idea is by forgiving other person, then you're going to actually heal from that as well. Okay, Ashley. Yeah, and so this is really the concept of Christian forgiveness that's really different from just the secular forgiveness, right? Secular forgiveness is kind of like you need to forgive other people so that you can feel better. But most people are like, well, I just want to hold on to this bitterness, and this is what's going to make me feel better. And so because of that, it's hard for them to forgive. But Christian forgiveness, it really gives us the motivation and the power to really forgive. Because it's this idea that God has actually forgiven us first. Right? So if we understand God has forgiven us, then how can we not forgive other people either? So again, that doesn't mean that it makes it less easier, right? But it actually really gives the power for us to actually forgive other people. Okay? Or the real motivation to forgive other people. And that's why if you look at like the Lord's Prayer, right? When Jesus says, "Oh, teach us how," when the disciples ask Jesus, like, teach us how to pray, Jesus actually says, one of the line is, forgive us as we have forgiven others. So it's like this continual idea that, oh, like, I haven't truly understood forgiveness if I can't really forgive other people. So that's like main part of Christianity, right? So it's really hard to continue to try to hold on to God, but hold on to hatred at the same time, right? It's kind of like I can diet all I want, but if I'm eating donut every single meal, like, I'm not going to lose weight. And that's like same thing as like trying to get close to God and yet holding on to hatred. It just can't work, right? Because the whole concept is I'm forgiven. Well, how can I not forgive? Okay. All right, so that's kind of a very quick summary of what forgiveness kind of looks like, and the motivation behind forgiveness. Again, doesn't mean that it's not easy, but next we're going to get to the different steps of actually getting to forgiveness. And I think these are going to be very practical and very helpful for all of us. Danielle, if you could read number 1 for us. Yeah. And I actually think this is for not for a lot of people, but I think for some people this is really hard. Because I think what some people do is they just want to get rid of the negative feelings. They don't want to deal with the negative feelings at all, or they don't want to, maybe it's too painful. And so they kind of like gloss over it. They go, well, my mom did this or my dad did this, but it wasn't too big of a deal. Okay? But the moment you continue to do that, right, you're kind of like downplaying the anger or downplaying the injury, then again, you're not going to get proper healing, right? If I think, like, for example, like, I hurt my arm, but if it's broken, then I'm actually going to really go get help. But if I'm like, I don't think it's really broken, I don't think it's a really big deal, I'm probably not going to go to the hospital. Does that make sense? Right? Or same thing, like if I have COVID, but if I'm it's just, it's not a big deal, it's just the flu or something like that, I'm not going to go to the hospital. Okay? Same thing here. You have to recognize the injury. So you got to recognize, you got to really face the fact that, hey, that this is the fact. This person has hurt me. Okay? So again, if you're able to better do that, you're able to move on. By the way, again, this is very difficult, especially when it comes to our parents, because some of us, we feel like we can't be angry at our parents. Okay? Or we feel like we have to say only good things about our parents. Okay? Again, depending on the culture, or remember, that's one of the dynamics of family as well. One of maybe the unspoken rules that you have of your family is I can't say negative things. I can't hate my mom, or I can't view my dad negatively. Again, there's all of these hidden things within us. And again, this is how genogram and the triangle relationship, it's going to help you to show you some of that. So that again, you could identify, really, really identify, hey, this person has hurt me this way, and therefore I am hurt. So you have to do that very well. All right, let's go to the second part. Was it Danielle who just read this? You did, right? Okay, me. Identify the emotions involved. As you become aware of the injuries that you have experienced in your life, you must also try to identify the feelings associated. Okay, number 1 is going to be fear. The feelings from childhood, when many of the injuries will have taken place, will usually be dominated by fear, and it is not hard to see why. Usually, the ones who hurt us as children were grown-ups. People we often looked up to and respected. So again, there might be a lot of fear within you. Long. Hmm. Hmm. Okay, so again, we have to identify different emotions that's involved. And guilt and shame, that's a good one. Okay, fear is a good one. Okay, what am I exactly fearful of? Again, that's going to help you to get, closer to the core issue. Or why do I feel guilty? Why do I feel shame? Okay, so again, it might be because you feel like you can't be angry, or you need to have mom has to have a good image, or dad has to have a good image, or my uncle, or whatever, right? So again, you might say, okay, everything was just my fault then. Okay, so you're having a false sense of guilt. Again, anger as well. You might have a wrong view of anger, so you might go, I can't be angry. So therefore, again, I think 1 and 2, it's I think it's very closely related. Okay, so again, if you try to see what are some of the emotions that are involved. Okay, why am I so angry, or why is it that I feel so much bitterness towards that person? Again, identifying these feelings, talking it out, writing it, it's going to be all very, very helpful. Let's get to the next one. Is it Esther? No, Long. No, Long just read it. Okay, Esther. Yeah. Okay, so the idea is we try to first identify what is it, why is it we're angry, what is this emotion, and then now you want to get rid of it, you want to express it. Now, obviously, you want to do it in a very wise way, because this is where anger becomes, it could be very sinful. Because here we like explode, or we punch, or we do it in a very passive aggressive way, or we leak. Okay, there's a lot of different ways we express it, but here's some of the ways you could do it. Stephen? Hmm. Yeah. Okay. And I would say, even with first one, I would be very careful as far as the trusted friend. I think it becomes really easy to gossip. So I think unless it's like a counselor or like a professional, um, yeah, I think number one is probably what we tend to do the most, but I think we actually go a little too extreme, and we end up just gossiping and damaging the other person's reputation more, I think. So I think you have to be very careful with number one. But I think the writing out, right? I think that's really, really powerful. Like expressing yourself, expressing the hurt and the anger and the brokenness that you have. I think that's going to be very, very important. Ashley. Right. And that's why some of us, when we talk to our friends, especially the ladies, like you guys feel so much better and you feel like you understand much better. Because like again, when it's inside here, then it's all kind of jumbled and you're saying things and then you say it and you're like, wow, I didn't really think that's what I was thinking about. But again, if you do something like this, an empty chair, again, doing it by yourself, it might be a little difficult, but having a counselor or having a friend help you with doing some of these things, it could be extremely helpful. Okay, to see again what's going on inside and for you to express some of these things. All right, let's go to, there's going to be 6 steps, I believe. So let's continue on. Danielle? Okay. In working through process of forgiveness, it often becomes necessary for a person to establish some new boundaries, right? Because maybe it could be our parents or family members, they have some really inappropriate boundaries with us. And because of that, we have to learn to set really good boundaries, healthy boundaries, okay? So boundaries are actually a really, really good thing. If you feel like you need to learn more about boundaries, really good book is called Boundaries, okay? By Henry Cloud. Really, really good book. But kind of like the concept is the reason why you want to have good boundary, and if you think of it like that, it becomes really, really beautiful. Think of boundaries like you want to keep out the bad, right? You want to keep out the bad, and you want to let in the good things. But a lot of times, people with bad boundaries, it's usually the opposite. Because like, especially with their parents or whatever, they learn to be okay with the bad coming in and they can't accept the good coming in. Does that make sense? So they learn, again, it could be abuse, emotionally, sexually, physically, whatever. Because of that, they learn to just accept, oh, I deserve this. I'm a bad person. Okay? And then when somebody tries to compliment you or say good things, you can't take that. Okay, so again, boundaries, having good boundaries, again, it's going to help you to keep out the bad and accept the good. So you need to have good boundaries. All right. So yeah, it is often necessary for a person to establish some new boundaries to give himself, herself some space to work in. Often these boundaries have to do with the way we relate to others, the way we let them relate to us. In many cases, setting boundary means that we need to physically stay away from another family member, either for a good time or for good. Okay. Loan, number 5. Mm. Yeah. So again, something like this, it can be really, really powerful. Because again, you could just say in your mind, yeah, I've forgiven them, I canceled them. But actually like doing an action, it makes it a lot more concrete. Esther, let's read the last one. Reconcile. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So actually, some Christians think, oh yeah, yeah, like forgiveness means reconciliation, but that's not necessarily the case, because again, reconciliation means it's both sides willing to work at it. But again, you could always choose to forgive somebody, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your relationship will be restored. Okay, I think as Christians, we need to always be open to the possibility, though. Okay, of course, we need to set proper boundaries. Okay? Just because you've forgiven somebody, that doesn't mean that you just let them go in and out, right? Just like I could have a good relationship with you, that doesn't mean that I just go into your house whenever I want, right? There's boundaries. And so every single person, all of us, we have boundaries. So I know, especially in the Christian world, we have a very negative view of boundaries. Like, oh, if you say no, like you're supposed to say yes to everything. But no, we have boundaries all the time. Okay? Our houses, that itself, there's boundaries, right? Again, these are not necessarily bad things. Okay. All right. There's a lot more we could actually talk about forgiveness. So let's go over it really quickly. So once again, basically 1, 2, and 3, it's basically recognizing the pain. What are the emotions? So 1 and 2, I think is very related. And number 3 is to express that. Number 4, it's going to be set the right boundaries. Number 5, forgive them. And then, hey, maybe there can be reconciliation, which is obviously the best. But maybe that person might not be ready. You might not be ready yet. And some of these things, it does take time. Okay? But I think the best way to understand forgiveness is it's a choice that you make. It's not a feeling. It's a choice. Okay? Feelings, you do have to deal with it, obviously. Okay? Because sometimes what you're going to do is you're going to forgive them, or you're going to choose to forgive them. You're going to say, I'm going to forgive them. But you're going to have times where you replay it in your mind, right? You go, oh, I'm going to like get back at them. Because emotions, feelings, you're hurt still. And that's going to come. But you have to constantly say, no, I've forgiven them. I've forgiven them. Okay? But that's going to happen. That's normal. Because that person has hurt you. So there's going to be that pain. Okay? So again, forgiveness does not necessarily mean you don't have feelings. That doesn't necessarily mean that there is no pain. That doesn't necessarily mean you just forgot everything and everybody's happy, happy, happy. Okay? But it's really a distinct choice that you're saying. It's an action and saying, you don't owe me anything anymore. Okay, I let go of that debt. Yeah, and I think the best way, obviously, Jesus actually tells us in Matthew. I think it's either Matthew 5 or Matthew 6. I think it's Matthew 5. But the concept that I think I tell this whenever somebody comes to me, because a lot of people come to me with relational issues, and usually a lot of it is forgiveness. I always tell them this, which is pray for them, like wish them good. Okay. It's gonna really fast forward this idea of forgiveness, this concept of forgiveness. Like pray for them. So a prayer that I always suggest is, God, this person has hurt me this way. Again, express all the hurts that you feel, and you say, God, but I prayed, because most of the time what we do is like, oh, because of that, like curse them, and I hope like they get bankruptcy, or like this happens to them, or they die, or they get hurt, or they get COVID, or whatever. A lot of negative thoughts in our head. But instead you say, God, they did something bad, they hurt me, and they did something bad. But however, I pray that they don't continue to do that. That you would change their heart. Okay? And that's really difficult to pray. But once you actually learn to practice that and do that, that's really, really going to help you. All right. Any questions before we finish? Any questions or clarifications I can make? Yes. The steps of forgiveness, or was it something else? Even before? What is forgiveness? Okay. Okay. Yeah. That's right. Mm-hmm. I see. Yeah. Right. So I think as far as step 5 goes, um, and this is depending on whether the person is alive or not, or whether, yeah. So I think number 5, when you actually cancel the debt, so you would actually tell that person, yeah, that you forgive them as well. Yeah, yeah. So if that's the case, right, with that caveat, then that person would benefit. Good. I mean, unless they don't know that they've hurt you, right? But if they know that they have hurt you, and I feel like as far as parent dynamic goes, most of our parents do hold on to a lot of guilt and shame for most cases. I think they know that again because they're not perfect parents, you know. So I think for most cases, yeah, if they do know that they have hurt you and you actually verbalize saying, you know, I forgive you, that's a very powerful, you know, release for them, obviously. Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. Sure. Yeah, yeah. Sure, sure. Right. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And obviously the worst would be, I don't want, so what, right? They might say I didn't hurt you, or that's on you. And but again, it's you could still forgive, right? Reconciliation in that kind of relationship is going to be very difficult, but forgiveness is still possible. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Great question. Any other clarification